concern about sort of, confining education, really. And I think a lot of questions just about what, I think that the pandemic has provided a kind of watershed moment to reconsider everything. And I think that education is high on the list of those things. And I think that it's such a celebration of the spirit of children and how we as adults can maximize their growth by providing. Freedom is a word that's overused, but providing room for imagination, just moment to moment, where there is a constant process of discovery, of each other, of oneself, of the natural world, of what you can do and not do effectively and successfully, of your own fears. And so it's such a holistic approach, but one that, I think increasingly has sort of fallen out of favor. And I guess, what is your sense in terms of this spirit of sort of learning adventure for children? I mean, where does it stand? What do you know? I mean, you've been immersing yourself in it for a while because you had 2 kids that went to it, right?
3 kids.
3 kids.
This is one of them.
One of them, okay. Maybe, and your son's name is?
Max.
Max.
And he's a teacher, so I think he could answer that.
And he's in the film, yeah. So yes, what are you seeing in terms of what you took away from Cool Camp, how you can apply it, how you can't apply it, where you see it being successfully harnessed, this energy?
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. That's a lot. I'm constantly on a daily basis trying to find the answer to those questions. I'm currently working in a preschool setting, and I'm working specifically in a preschool setting because that setting has more freedom for children.
Sure.
And also for teachers. There's a lot of pressure on teachers to teach a certain way, which largely is influenced by a pressure that parents feel to make sure that their kid is ready and can do all the things and get into the good schools. And it's kind of this trickle-down effect of making sure your kid can be successful. And so I think it's a bit of a paradigm shift that has to happen as in a larger sense of what it means to be successful, and what will help people be successful, and less focus on academics and worksheets and more focus on experiences. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just trying to do that in my own little way in my classroom. But I think settings like nature schools or more progressive project-based learning settings are where that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's some of this in Vermont. I mean, certainly Circus Smirkus is a project. You know about Circus Smirkus at all? Up in Greensboro.
I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, which is for kids 10 to 18, basically, where 6 professionals mentor them and put them on the road for 65 shows under a 700-seat tent in the summer. And there's a lot of, throw them into the water and they'll swim. Mm-hmm. Sort of way. It's really about a great deal of, it's looking at kids as fully capable in ways beyond which we are used to seeing them or recognizing them. And I think that in my own sense, if there's one thing that we really do fail to do, it is to really look at kids' potential and to get them to reach beyond their grasp as soon as possible. And when you do, they find some footing that actually propels them, frankly, for the rest of their lives. It makes them, constant learners and everything else. Mm-hmm. But if we protect them from it, they end up out of high school sort of confused and, they have to really apply themselves extraordinarily once they get to high school and college if they don't have some passion developed before them. That's my experience of teaching. I've taught a long time, so that's just sort of what I bring to it, and that's what I respond to in the film. Mm-hmm. That these kids are going to be in pretty good shape when they're in middle school. Yeah. To me,
Yeah, I think something that I took from Catherine and Randall and being at Cool Camp is kind of what you're talking to, which is for me a respect for children and regarding them as just an equal. And
Right,
so
that's
it's
right.
really, you're trying to get to, in interacting with them, you're just trying to understand who they are
Right.
and get to and relate to them as another individual.
Right.
And so as a teacher, that's kind of largely what I do is in parent-teacher conferences, I'm just trying to, in a way, introduce the parent to their child. Be like, this is who I see your child as,
Sure.
and get them to relate to their child in the same way.
And it frequently takes that outsider's perspective, sometimes to, in some ways, free a parent to see the child in a new way. And I'm sure that, I mean, there was the comment in the film just how kids would come back with more confidence, inevitably leadership ability, risk-taking, problem-solving, flexibility. You know, these are all very important skills that don't traditionally get taught in day-to-day classroom learning. Anyway, what time? Bess, why don't you come up and join us? And I'm going to come back, but, you know, all the marbles. Yes. Can you explain the genesis of the project? Yeah, I'm going to need to go. I'm going to leave Bess in my place. She's seen all the films. And I really
Hello, how are you? He's got to be at the Karen Allen thing in 10 minutes, so they've got him coming and going. So yes, I wanted to ask both of you how you made your movies. And you know, part of the wonderfulness of all these films is that this is really about young children and creativity, right, and expression. And so both of your films had so much of that in it. So just talk a little bit about how you made the films and what was your, how did they come about and how did you get the kids involved?
Yeah, so I'm Melissa McClung. I'm from Western Massachusetts, and thanks so much for having me. I wanted to make a short film, and I read the H.G. Wells short story, The Star, which is it's a short story and a sweeping story about an asteroid coming towards Earth, and it was made in the late 1800s, but it reminded me of climate change, and it also had it was a world component, but it had this really like townsperson component that I liked about it. And I wanted to showcase Western Massachusetts because, we don't see a lot of films from there. And so that was sort of the genesis for me. And then from there, I knew I wanted to have a child star because I really like working with non-actors, and pretty much everyone I worked with was a non-actor, and children sort of by definition are non-actors. And also, I remember I had a really creative childhood in the woods, going to great camps, sort of like Cool Camp, and so I took inspiration from that and sort of the genesis of my creativity and tried to instill that into the film.
And who did the animation?
I worked with a stop motion animator for some of it, but I say humbly that all the rest was done by me.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Actually, I shot this before COVID, and then and had an idea and worked with a stop motion animator, like I said, and then sort of put it in a drawer for a little while, and then last August I took it out of the drawer, and since COVID I had really delved more into visual effects and animation myself, and so then I put a lot more of it into the film, which was really, really fun to do, sort of take what I've already shot and then add more.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Thank you.
All right, let's hear about the traveling Thespian troupe. How did that come about? Are those your kids?
All of them? Yes. No.
Some of them.
No, none of those are my kids, actually. So this is, I'm here representing Tom's Farm Films, and it's a summer camp, and I think you can tell that, we take it very seriously, and it's all,
Yes.
it's all strictly business.
Method acting.
Exactly, and
Yes.
it's based on child labor, and we're in it for the money, really. This is, it's a 5-day summer day camp. You drop your kids off. We teach you how to make a movie, give you costumes and we all kind of make a movie together. You know, in my group I had like a dozen 11 to 13 year olds. I'm like one 10-year-old, and you know, they've got kind of a system, they got kind of a program, and but you're kind of just throwing a backpack with like some gear, and here's where all the costumes are, and they're gonna get bored around 3 in the afternoon, and just let them wander off. We're on this like big flower farm, and yeah, it's kind of controlled chaos, and you know, then you go away and edit a movie, and they've been doing this for like this, I think was the 3rd or 4th summer. Now they've been doing this. A former classmate of mine who started this, and yeah, it's great. I definitely want to go back sometime.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking of watching all of this was my son went to a camp actually in Vermont that you may know about called Farm and Wilderness. And Farm and Wilderness has a specific side of the camp which is called Flying Cloud. It's only for boys. You walk 2 miles into the woods and you drop your kid off there. There's no electricity, there's no nothing. The boys are just there. It's a little bit Lord of the Flies. And we sent our kid there for 2 years, and he loved it. But you know, there's so many different kinds of experiences for kids. There's so many kinds of different kind of camps. There's very expensive camps. I think one of the things, maybe all of you could talk a little bit about this, just the control factor, right? Like, how did we get there? Like, why are we so scared of children? I mean, obviously, you know, I was even thinking, my God, that kid's on the side of those 2 little 2-year-olds or whatever wandering around up there, 3-year-olds. It's like, Lord have mercy. Or, you know, just letting kids run around, or frankly, even letting kids use their imagination in a way that is not restrictive, you know, when working with children actors or whatever. So just wanted to sort of get your idea of why do you think we're there, and do you think we're moving into another place where maybe more of this freedom can be possible? Anything about that? Yeah.
Why camp and where we're at? Well, I went to Girl Scout camp, and when my kids discovered this camp, they came back transformed. And for me, the experience, that's what made me want to make the film, because I was like, what happens at that camp? That they're so alive when they return, alive. And so I think, you know, being outside will do that for children. And I don't really know about other camps. I really haven't, you know.
What was the difference between like Girl Scout camp and?
Yeah, my camp was all structured, and you know, your den mothers came, and your den mothers are some of your mothers, and you have activities and crafts. It was much more structured, and we didn't have a lot of freedom. But it was still nice to be camping, and it was still nice to, you know, go away from home and be in the woods. But this camp is just so communal in a way that ours didn't feel communal. And to me, that's, you know, one of the beauties of it. Yeah, do other people want to talk about
Just
that?
whatever anybody else wants to say about that. Go ahead.
Well, mine was not made into camp, but I guess I'll just take this opportunity. It's been a really interesting experience. It was really interesting working with the girl Lucia Dingo Early, who I worked with, was 9 when I worked with her, and it was a small crew, but it was interesting. She was the only kid on set, and it's my first time really working with a child on set. And I'm still I would love to work with children more. I think I will, but it was an interesting experience having her surrounded by adults the whole for the whole shoot, and it almost makes me want to write movies with more than one child. But it was just an interesting experience. So if anyone is a filmmaker here and wants to talk about it, I would love to talk about it more. But how to integrate the child into the adult experience, we tried to do that, but it definitely was not easy.
Well, what struck me about your piece actually is that, like, okay, so mine, it was like kids performing adult humor. And with yours, it was like all these grown-ups acting like children, right? And it all kind of had a dream logic, child logic to it. And you have like the one kid who kind of knows what's going on amidst all of the adults that really seemed, infantile in some ways. Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic, actually, and it had that kind of childlike wonder and spirit to it. So I don't know, maybe you're recapturing. In terms of like where we're at in this moment, so I've got almost 4-year-old twins, and I try and let them roam to some extent, and there's a point at which they're gonna fall off the thing on the playground, and I can see it coming, and so I'm like watching, like the kids up on the rocks, and it's like there's this sense of peril, and how long should the leash be? That's a great question, and we probably don't let it be long enough anymore. So in terms of this, and I think that the people who run the camp that I did this for, they would be very much a fan of Cool Camp, and it's very, that's kind of their ethos as well, and they have like 5 of their own kids who just run wild, and they erect a boundary around it, basically like a physical boundary, but also I think just an emotional boundary in which it's like it's okay to just goof off and try whatever you want here. And so I think that once kids know that they're in some sort of safe confines, that they can get into that, and the adults can maybe relax a little bit too.
Anything you want to say? I thought, was it you in the film who said, or somebody in the film said, the first week I was trying to control the kids, or it was like, that was you, right? And then somebody told me, they're just having fun, just let go, and that must be a very freeing moment when you're able to trust that. I did want to just ask, was there ever anybody who fell and got hurt? Was there ever a kid who was like a major pain in the butt and like didn't go along with the situation? And how did you deal with any of that, or not? Maybe it was not that never happened.
Well, there were 2 kids that got hurt, and they were the child of Catherine and the child of Randall. And I think because their parents were there, somehow that interfered with their, I don't know. But they both needed stitches, so it was never a serious injury, and so that's kind of a miracle.
Yeah.
Nobody ever had a serious injury there. And what was the other? Oh, and yes, there were some kids that were more challenging, and I didn't focus on those challenges in the film, but there was a lot of behind the scenes discussions between the adults and the counselors about, we have to watch this kid, and this kid isn't quite ready for as much freedom, and somebody needs to be near them and keep an eye on them. And so there's a lot of adults organizing stuff behind the scenes. Isn't that right, Mike?
Yeah, and so Catherine started the camp, but there's also Catherine Michael's School.
Right.
And I worked there for a few years, and I feel like Cool Camp adopts what that school does for those children, which is they just kind of become the teacher's partner. Mm-hmm. So if Calder was a kid at KMS for many years who had a hard time, and he was just my partner, and sometimes I was literally holding his hand and taking him from room to room, or sometimes he was just in the same room as me. But they just become your partner, and through that process, you start giving them jobs, they gain some confidence, they're seeing you model how to interact with your peers and with other children. And so that's kind of how Cool Camp used to do it.
Great. All right, anybody have any questions out there? Yes.
For the Cool Camp crew, first of all, thank you. That was a wonderful sort of document of childhood and life, even beyond the specifics of the camp, and the message, which feels really, really important. And as I was watching, I kept thinking of people I wanted to show it to. I almost feel like it should be required viewing for new parents. I wish I had seen it when my kids were really little, because I think it would have helped me fear a little less. And I tried to be kind of bold in letting them get into their own scrapes, but it's hard, especially in the culture in this country. my question was really simple. I'm assuming that some of the early footage wasn't necessarily taken as a documentary, but at what point did you decide, did you have the idea to make it a documentary?
Well, I started in 1999, so you saw footage from as early as '82, and then Catherine was an early adopter of video cameras, and she had cameras from 1989 when my kids started up till 1998. And then when I came in 1999, she put the camera away and she was like, okay, I don't have to film anymore. But she would film herself, or Brenda would film, or other kids would film. Just whoever wanted to film could film. So that was all just like documenting camp, and her intention in doing that was she thought, at the end I'm gonna make a little video and give it to the parents so they can see what happens at camp. And she never did that. And so when I decided to make a film in 1999, she said, okay, here's all these tapes from all these years and you can have them. So I had about 50 hours of old footage, and then I shot about 100 hours over a period of from 1999 to 2018 17 was the last time I went and shot. So, yeah, it was a 22-year-long project, which I used to not want to tell anybody because I thought, that's so embarrassing. I'm just so slow, and that's terrible. But now I'm like, no, it's fine. It's okay. It took a long time to figure out what I wanted to make with it and how I wanted to tell the story. Yeah, and also to raise money. It took a long time.
Any other question? Yeah, down here.
I went to a canoe camp in Northern Ontario, which kind of it's not like the same as Cool Camp, but like we're sent on trail for 3.5 weeks, 2 leaders, most probably 12 campers, but they do what you guys teach at your camp, or what you did teach is sort of the same teachings they teach at North Waters and Landscape, which is the camp, where it's like leadership and responsibility and independence, and while also having fun on like canoeing down rapids and stuff. So like I just want to say like I can see some similarities from the camp that I went to and the camp that you went to and your kids went to. Yeah. And plus the film was great. There was some really funny moments during it. It was very enjoyable.
1,
Thank
2,
you.
3, 4, 5.
Yeah, that one.
I thought she was counting how like the inches and then she kept going down.
Oh no, like she had a whole system she was working on. Any other questions out there? Yes, back there.
I just have a quick question. It took 22 years to make High Rock. That's great. It was well worth it. I'd love to hear from the other 2 filmmakers how long it took your film to be made.
Well, my film took about, that's a complicated question. I started in 2018, and I shot it in 2 weekends and edited it for about 2 months, not full time. And then I put it in a drawer when COVID happened. I put it in a drawer just sort of because, like I said, I was getting more into animation and visual effects, and I just could feel that I needed to develop my skill a little further. And so I put it in a drawer. I was frustrated. And then COVID happened and I didn't want to submit it without in-person festivals like this wonderful one. So I hung on to it, and then I took it out of the drawer in August. So 2018 to now, but not really.
We did our script read-through and assigned character roles on Tuesday. We shot Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I took the footage, back to Seattle where I live, and then ignored it for like 2.5 months because they do a big red carpet premiere at a theater in Santa Cruz for all the kids, but they had to push it because of COVID. And so I was like, sweet, I have more time to edit it. And then, I think I finished cutting it in like December or January. And then, it's, just kind of ship it out. And so, it was a pretty quick turnaround, I guess. For a 10-minute movie to post was pretty brief.
That's great.
Yes.
Just curious what has become of Cool Camp. Has it been preserved or?
What has become of Cool Camp?
Cool Camp, the last Cool Camp was in 2018. It was run by Catherine's daughter. And since then, it was her family property. They own the property. And I think, well, it ran its course, but also Catherine's family got a little more hesitant about this use of the property and liability, and also the environmental effects, because the water table has dropped in that area and it's been somewhat affected by construction upstream and global warming. It's extremely hot to begin with, and then it's even hotter. And so there were a lot of factors contributing to it ending, but it lives on.
Can you even do anything like this anymore with liability? I mean, did you have insurance? I mean, can you even run a camp like that?
Yeah, no, it's a problem.
I mean,
It is a problem, and that was one of the problems she was encountering. More and more restrictions, less and less workarounds to kind of get insurance without sort of fully revealing what you're doing. And if an insurer ever saw it, they would never insure her. Yeah. So.
Right.
Problem.
Yes.
I just want to make a sort of comment on, and it's a question really, as I know Ellen and I was talking to her earlier the other day, and we were remembering growing up. I didn't go to Cool Camp, I went to other kinds of camps, but I grew up like Ellen, our generation, just going out into the woods and playing unsupervised for hours and hours and weeks and years at a time. And I think we all are stronger for that in our generation or whatever. But somehow the culture has evolved that we didn't want that for our children. I don't know why. I mean, I remember hovering over my children, even though they grew up here in the woods of Vermont, and not giving them as much freedom as I have. And so what I wonder is why? Knowing how strong we were from being afforded that kind of independence, why is my generation not afforded that to our children? So
That's a great question. I hope everybody heard it. I mean, I don't have the answer. I mean, I think it's obviously a fear thing. Somewhere along the line, there was I mean, I don't know if you guys heard, what was it, 10 years ago or 15 years ago in New York City, a woman had her child, who was I think 7 at the time or something, go to school on the subway in New York City, and she was essentially arrested. Essentially, she was like, her kid was practically taken away from her when they found out, because it was like, how could you possibly let your child get on a subway and go to school in New York City? To which she said, well, kids used to do this all the time, A, and B, I went through the whole thing with my kid. We traveled many times together, whatever. And so I think somewhere, along the line, there's been a fear of crime. I think there was, a lot of things that happened in the 70s and 80s that became very fearful for parents around letting your children stay outside, and that whole stranger danger thing that came around. I don't know, when was that? 70s, 80s? Like, don't talk to strangers.
McMartin Preschool in the early 80s. Remember that? It was a huge scandal in Los Angeles because some kid said something that they thought the teacher had abused a child, sexually abused a child, and it turned out it was all just a big, huge fantasy in a way, but it really affected parents.
Yeah.
And parents, I think, also had always parents want to improve on their parents, right? So maybe somehow we interpreted, that we needed to improve by being more supervising and more attentive, because our parents were generally at work and ignoring us. And in a way, that was great for us, but the reverse, didn't really work out so well either. So I don't know what the answer is, but.
Anybody else have any thoughts? I mean, the latchkey thing, remember that? That became a really bad thing. Maybe it was, I don't know. But I mean, kids used to come home and their parents weren't there, and they used to just go and play around and run around their neighborhood. I think the other thing is that the whole breakdown of community somehow started to happen, right? I mean, you used to have kids who would just come home, and you'd have a whole street of kids that would just play together until it was time for dinner.
And some people that lived, at home, old ladies would keep track of kids because everybody knew everybody, and now nobody knows each other, so there's that.
This relates, I remember when I was writing the script, which I wrote I didn't write a traditional script, but I got a lot of comments from people I showed it to, where is this girl's parents? What's happening with her parents?
Really?
And I think part of it was, there isn't really, people wanted, did she fight with her parents and that's why she went out into the woods? They wanted it was more story structure, but it also was sort of, where are her parents? And I was really resistant to bringing her parents into it at all. And I just sort of followed my instinct, and clearly her parents have nothing to do with my film. And she's just sort of a lone ranger. And so that's my input. I don't know, I think that children's story, we see so many stories about children that are orphans and things like that, and part of that maybe is because that child, that gives a catalyst for the child to have that sense of self, or something. They're not hovered over with their parents in stories, and we always identify, we also have sympathy for them that way, of course, but also it automatically makes them a full person in our mind. And I think that it's really interesting to think about making stories about children without parents, and it's really interesting that all of our films don't have parental figures at all in it, sort of.
Yeah.
Counselors.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, actually, and that there's a difference between, we've come to see parenting as only supervisory. And so, you said it when you were talking about, at first, having to be able to relax. And I think one of the other kids who became a counselor, too, was talking about how, okay, well, when you're hanging out with 4-year-olds and you're not a counselor, then it's then that's weird, right? But the reason that it worked was because you were engaged in play with the children, as opposed to just being there to be a scold or something like that. And so I think, you're saying, okay, well, our parents may have given us a lot of free rein, but they were also neglectful, and so maybe we went too far the other way. So there may be this middle path where it's being present without necessarily having to, hover over, but actually engage in whatever the play is.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, all the films were beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.